Hey guys, how's it going? So the balance patch was shown off tonight, and this is one that has been kind of anticipated and also kind of a lot of people have been a little scared of because right now people really hate the meta. They really want a big change. The last few balance patches have been really disappointing. So people were hoping, oh, maybe it'll be good. And a lot of people thought it would just be really disappointing. But first of all, a lot of units and even 3 artifacts being changed, which is nice. Normally they do 2 and like, I don't know, 5 or 6, but none of them being changed is great. So that was a big deal. And also a lot of units that I really like, and also a lot of people have been wanting to get buffs, actually are getting buffs. Solitaria. She's been so bad for so long. Designer a little bit, such a bad character. Both these characters really need buffs. Chloe, Celine, Dilibet, Sinful Angelica. The bottom 3 is kind of whatever. But these units getting buffed is pretty big, right? And I guess a little bit of a spoiler, the buffs are good. Like, the buffs are really, really good. And so it's really exciting. And I can kind of go into depth explaining why each unit has potential and what it looks like. So Solitaria's main changes are now she does an S1, like a single target hit, that then goes into the AoE. And that's a big deal because one of her big weaknesses was she was constantly using an AoE and she would just get counterattacked over and over and over. It was terrible. She was getting countered by characters she's supposed to counter, like Arctia, Mercedes, Violet, etc. This makes it so she can just keep hitting a target that doesn't really matter too much and then AoEing the team anyways. She still gets the AoE, but she can't be countered, which is an elegant way of them solving that. She gets Dispel on the target that she's hitting initially, and then her AoE still has the chance to stun, and it also has the Daydream function, which is putting on random debuffs. So that's pretty huge. They decrease the damage because you're now hitting with 2 hits, basically. But another huge change is you now have stealth constantly, which is a really, really big deal. It makes it so she doesn't have to just S3 and then stealth and then it's gone. If she gets knocked out, as long as she's tanky enough, she can get another turn, get it again. It makes it so she's really hard to deal with. You have to have AoE to get rid of her. She's going to be honestly very frustrating to deal with. I think she might actually be a little too annoying. She also gets this barrier when she uses this, so she's hard to knock out of stealth, and her S3 is a 3-turn cooldown, and this lasts for 2 turns, which means there's very little downtime, and she's constantly invisible. I think she's going to be a very toxic unit, actually. I'm a little worried about her. I'm going to be using her to counter Arctia, Mercedes, Violet, Remnant Violet. Very, very strong in those situations, but even if your opponent doesn't have those, she might be such an annoying unit, constantly stripping buffs and putting on debuffs that she might actually be used a lot. I think she's a lot of the time going to use Fairy Tale Tenebria's artifact, which is if you do an extra attack, there's a 60% chance you strip their buffs and also do extra fixed damage. So I think it's 1,500 if it's a plus 30 artifact, which it may sound like that's not really that much, but over the course of a match, let's say she just gets like 4 or 5 S1s off. I mean, that's like 6,000 damage to the whole team if you get 4 of them. That's a huge amount of extra damage just being dealt to their team, just from a support unit. And you're also stripping buffs constantly. I think she's going to be a pretty big deal. I'm definitely immediately going to build her upon this buff release, and I'm going to be spamming her, I think. Designer a little bit. This is one of my favorite units, and I think she's been terrible for so long. She's not able to function at all in her role, what she's supposed to do, which is kind of a cleanser that's also a bruiser. One of the big changes they made is now she gets 10 fighting spirit instead of 5. It was too hard to activate her S2. She definitely needed something. I think this is pretty helpful. And now she also gets increased defense when it activates to make it so that she's able to hit really hard when she gets her turn, because she really didn't do any damage unless she had defense buff, and now she's able to self-give it to herself. You don't need to set it up with a team, and you can use it reactively if your whole team is like disabled or stunned and she gets the defense buff. That's great. It also helps her get a turn easier because she's much tankier, right? And now when she has 3, she increases the combat readiness of all other allies by 15%. Now, I think she's going to be a big anti-cleave unit. I don't know how good she's going to be outside of that, but I think what you can do now is build a faster designer Lilibet with a really high amount of damage, and she's going to be very strong into Ran and Peyra and units like that, which is kind of a big deal. The fact that she gives defense buff also means that when she gets her turn, she might be able to kill the cleave team. So Politis reduces the combat readiness by 40%, or by 20% of that 40. So, you know, she's only gained half value, and you might have to ban Politis if you're fighting that, but now she's a legitimate threat, I think. Now, one big issue is this decreases buff duration, so it doesn't actually work on bombs from Seaside or Summertime area, which is a bit of an issue. She can cleanse herself with this, but this doesn't cleanse her team from bombs, which I really, really don't like. I think this should definitely have just been dispel all debuffs. I don't know why it doesn't. But I think this change has a lot of potential. I'm hoping it's actually good. I think it's going to be a good anti-cleave solution, though, if you are using her correctly. So Chloe's change, overall, this is really not that much. I saw comments saying stuff like, oh, she's nerfed, but I think people are being ridiculous. So now she gets 50% CR when she puts the nail on. That's nice. And now she gets attack buff when she's doing that if you have this EE. So now she's much better for Wyvern. Yes, her S3 does less damage, but its cooldown is decreased, and now she's giving herself attack buff. I think that's pretty huge. No one's using her outside of Wyvern or anything like that right now, and she wasn't even that good at it, so it's a nice little change. Celine, this is actually the one that I'm probably the most excited for. I actually, when I was first looking over it, I was thinking like, oh, this seems okay. But the more I thought, the more I think this is actually huge. I think she's going to be incredibly good. So first of all, dispels all debuffs in the caster when intuition procs. So even if they stun you, or Angel of Light goes, or Lilius, anything like that, you dispel the debuffs and immediately use this. And increases the combat readiness of the caster by 20%. If you have her artifact on, and it's plus 30, let's say, that's an extra 24%. So that's 44% combat readiness to the caster, and attack buff. She cleanses, then attack buff, pushes up, and does the attack. And her S3 now grants a barrier for 2 turns based off of her attack. And the healing's slightly decreased, but that doesn't matter too much. The barrier is going to be bigger. So initially it seems like, okay, well, you know, she's more threatening and good. That seems fine. But I think it's better than just being used against Cleave or a few of these units. I think this is actually a huge deal. I think she's technically a counter to Angel of Light and Emo Lilius. Angel of Light uses her S3. She cleanses and immediately gets the counterattack and is able to then, you know, S2, S3 somebody. And I think if you get the stealth EE on her, she's actually a counter to Emo Lilius teams, because Emo Lilius will S3, which debuffs your team, but uses a non-attack skill. Even though she gets an extra turn, Emo Celine will do the counterattack, push up, be ready to take the next turn, but then she'll turn invisible and Emo Lilius can't S2 her to stop her, which means that you can immediately S3 right after. And you're invisible, and you get a barrier, so Emo Celine will even be able to lap around to get another turn after that. That makes it so you can probably take out at least a fourth of the Emo Lilius' team. I did some numbers with Emo Celine. I'm able to make one with like 4,001 her attack, 325 crit damage. She gives herself attack buff. She's going to be on pen set. And to a team with Vigor and Aureus and 1,300 defense, her S2 is going to be doing about 12,000, and then you get to follow up with S3 for 11,000. And this is with like maximum defenses pretty much on a team. You're going to be able to just shred somebody. That's kind of a huge deal. Now it's random if you get the stealth EE, so that's the one issue. But if you go for the highest attack one, you can just eliminate somebody with this character. I think she's going to be amazing into Cleave. I think she's good versus Angel of Light and good versus Emo Lilius, and I'm actually kind of excited. I'm really, really excited to use this unit. She's one of my favorite units in the game. I have her plus 15. I'm all ready. The only problem is you have to upgrade her artifact enough so that it gets to 100% chance. But other than that, I think this is an incredibly well-designed buff, and I'm very excited. Dilibet, another character I like, and that I also have plus 15. So they made it so that now her bleeds are 3 instead of 4, whatever, slightly increased chance. But now the big thing is, when the target is bleeding after the attack, increases the combat readiness of the caster by an additional 50%. So if you S2 somebody and they get 1 bleed stack, she gets 100% CR, which is basically an extra turn. So you can S2 immediately into S3. And, you know, if you actually finish somebody off, it decreases the skill cooldown by a turn. This is kind of cool, because one of the big issues a little bit is she just couldn't really do enough damage unless you built her full damage. And then she was kind of awkward, and you could just run other characters to do a similar thing. But now that she's able to S2 into S3 like this, that actually that makes her a big threat. She's able to do a lot of damage in 1 turn. And you could possibly run her really fast and go into the S2, S3 to kill somebody immediately, or you could run her kind of slower bruiser, wait until people's immunity falls off, and go for an S2, S3. You could possibly put Sigurds on her as well, because she's a warrior. And she has very tanky stat lines, so it's possible that that could work. I'm a little bit on the fence about this, just because I think her stats are really bad for damage, but she could become a decent bruiser. I'm very interested in this, and I'm definitely going to be trying her as well. Oh yeah, and exclusive equipment now dispels 2 debuffs when she uses her S2. It's not going to work versus Angel of Light, but you know, that'll work versus some random debuffs like Blind and other stuff like that, which is great. Sinful Angelica. Now this is, it's very simple, but it's something nice, and I'm glad that they did this for her. So now she dispels a debuff from all allies. That's great. So, you know, if you have something bad on your team, she just gets rid of it, helps you out. Possibly Sinful Angelica would be okay versus Emma Lilius in a way, because you remove the attack down and give your team attack up. I'm not really sure if that's not exactly a counter or anything, but it's just nice that they added this. I don't know if she's really going to be breaking the mold, but it's helpful. Inosis change really doesn't really matter too much. It's nice, but she's a 3-star. She's already kind of awkward. This isn't really going to influence too much, sadly. Lucy, she's coming back with the rerun of the Valentine's event, but it just doesn't really matter when it really comes down to it. She's going to be a little more helpful with Katie's and stuff like that, though. Aiden, weakness shared, can't be dispelled. Doesn't matter at all, really. Now, Cradle of Life, it lasting 2 turns means it's way better against Wyvern. This is really good if you're using like Terranor Guard with it or other stuff like that. It's really, really helpful. The one downside is they remove Poison, which is actually the best thing against Wyvern, and they're adding Burn, so I guess you do a little less damage technically, but lasting 2 turns is great, increased chance. That's a little helpful. This is an interesting one. Little Queen's Huge Crown doing 16% damage, then if you have a barrier, an extra 16%. 32% is a huge amount. But there's one kind of big issue with that, and it's that, are you really going to put this on a character, a warrior specifically, just in case they have a shield? Like, if they might have FCC, yeah, but maybe they don't. And, you know, I guess Emil Quirk gives a shield, but it feels really awkward. I'm not sure if people are going to sacrifice using other artifacts to use this one unless they take this character only versus teams that have shields. I think it's interesting, but I don't really think it's anything too crazy. And El's Fist, increased attack by 10%. I don't really think that's the problem with El's Fist. It's a nice little addition, but I don't think people are really going to be using this artifact too much. Yeah, the artifacts are really not anything too special, but the characters, this is a huge deal. They now have characters that are able to fight against how, like the current Cleave teams, which is like one of the big problems of the meta is people are just spamming the same Cleave team over and over. These 2 units are great versus it. Solitaria is able to deal with how cancerous some stuff like Arctia Mercedes is. She can help versus just random annoying Violet picks, and she's good versus Remnant Violet. I think Arcdemon made Remnant Violet harder to use. I think Solitaria is kind of putting him in ground. It's a little sad, actually, because Remnant Violet doesn't really deserve to get punished this hard, because he was actually pretty fair, but he's getting hit hard. Dilibet, just making a unit way better, honestly, just a nice change. Chloe's pretty whatever. Sinful Angelica, a nice little change, and then these 3 don't really matter, but I think what this patch shows is that the balance team is actually thinking, and usually they really don't want to do that, and they've been just churning out trash balance changes over and over, just making characters incredibly frustrating over and over and hard to deal with. I mean, Solitaria might be, but let's hope not. But their patches have been incredibly bad. The community's kind of hated all of them recently. This is a real big step in the right direction and showing that they might actually be listening to the community about how they should be going about balancing this stuff. And they actually balanced an okay amount of units, thank God. Usually it would have been like maybe just Solitaria, Chloe, Dilibet, and then like 2 of these, and no one would care. And the changes probably would have been less thought out and bad. And at the end of this post, they had something saying, basically they were talking about like, oh, we can advance forward thanks to the help of the suggestions and opinions from all our heirs, etc., etc., right? Normally sounds like corporate crap, but this is the first patch in a while that I think has actually kind of spoken to the players, and a lot of people are actually kind of excited about. So I'm very happy about this. It makes me a little more optimistic that maybe they actually are listening a little bit. There was a Korean stream a little while back where the Korean players were very angry and they were trying to address, yeah, we're going to try and fix the issues you have with the meta and a lot of these broken units, etc. So I'm really glad to see this, and I hope that this entire balance patch ends up being really positive for the game. It sounds like it, but we'll have to see what happens when it actually releases. But that's kind of my analysis on the whole balance patch here, and thanks a bunch for watching.